From Mountain Home to Raft River, we've got all the District 4 analysis you'll need to know. This is the Magic Valley Prepcast with Scott Burton.
That's right. Welcome into another edition of the Magic Valley Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com, your weekly destination for all things District 4. Brandon Bainey joined by Scott Burton. Scott, 2 days have started. How exciting.
Yeah, it's nice to be back at it, and back at it without the restrictions that we had last year. Marching into last year was nothing short of a nightmare. So it's nice to have some normalcy. It's kind of fun.
Yes, without those restrictions. The only thing you got to worry about this time of year is the air quality, right? Because of wildfires.
It's funny because last year, we go through all this COVID stuff and we don't even know if we're going to have seasons. And, in my first, year as AD and my very first event was a soccer game and before football and everything else. And we're thinking, okay, this is going to go. We're actually going to have an event. And then next thing you know, there's a fire and the air quality stunk and we had to cancel the soccer game because of air quality. And it's like, really, it's not COVID or murder hornets. It's going to be the smoke.
That was an appropriate sign of your tenure and things to come, right?
Oh my goodness, was it ever? So this is refreshing, and I don't even know what to do in normal situations, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to talk today about football. That's what everybody gets most excited about. Mm-hmm. And the number one football player that people are going to want to watch this year is in Gooding, and that is Colston Loveland, the senior tight end who signed with Michigan. He's going to go play for Jim Harbaugh. It's got to be one of the most widely lauded recruits I've seen in some time in the state of Idaho.
Oh, I mean, there's no question. I mean, he is, if I'm not mistaken, it's Idaho's fourth 4-star recruit in the last 20 years. And so, you hear about, Vander Esch and those guys that come out of Idaho, but those are rarities. But this is a highly recruited guy. And, the recruiting process for him was just insane. I mean, every Pac-10 school was knocking on his door. But, the interesting thing about, Colston is that he's a relationships guy, and he wanted to go to a place that was going to be about relationships. He was focused on player development. And when he went and visited Michigan, I was like, holy cow. I mean, he struck up great relationships with the Arbaughs, Jim and his brother. And they've got a reputation for developing tight ends. And then the minute you walk into the big house, game over, and so, Idaho's on his side. Well, I think everybody's pretty excited. They rally around these kinds of kids. And it's good for our state and definitely good for the Magic Valley.
Yeah, it's so awesome for Gooding and the Magic Valley as a whole. As you said, early in the summer, Alabama offered him and everybody thought, well, who turns down Alabama? That's like turning down the mafia. You don't refuse Nick Saban. And everybody thought it was a slam dunk. And then here comes Michigan. It was intriguing to watch that.
No, it really was because, with all of the offers he was getting, and like I mentioned, Pac-10 or the Pac-12 rather, right next door, knocking on his door. At the end of the day, Arizona, Oregon State, Auburn, Alabama, LSU, Michigan, those were the top dogs for him. And then on the visits, man, Michigan did something for him, and the relationships that he struck up with the Harbaughs. It made sense. And so here we go.
Yeah, and that's going to make the SCIC this year, that conference in Class 3A football, really exciting to watch. It's only a 4-team league, but I think you're going to see quality night in, night out. Gooding, we talk about it as kind of like a co-favorite, I guess you could call it. It was a toss-up on the preseason coaches poll as to who they thought was going to do better. Loveland is awesome, of course, good tight end, but he wasn't even the most lauded offensive player a year ago. That was their quarterback, Curtis Atkinson. Yeah,
Atkinson was the SCIC Offensive Player of the Year in the conference. Threw for over 1,600 yards last year. He's back, and so, Gooding, in any other year, you would look at Gooding's roster and what Gooding has coming back, and you would say, these guys could quite possibly win the whole thing. And then you go, oh, wait. You got Kimberly in the same conference, and it is just insane what these two teams are going to bring to the table. They are loaded, both of them.
Yeah, so for our statewide team previews we do at IdahoSports.com. By the way, we've got about 70% of the schools online. So if you're looking and you don't see your favorite team yet, just keep checking back, because every day we're getting more and more back from the coaches and getting them written and uploaded. So, but as we're sending these out, we ask every coach kind of like, hey, who are some guys in the conference to keep an eye on that aren't on your team? And Cameron Anderson, the head coach at Gooding, replied back, everybody from Kimberly, in all caps.
Yeah, and it is. And those two schools, sitting here at a 4A school, looking at what those two schools have, there are a lot of 4As that are just chomping at the bit, salivating, going, where are these kids? They're in Kimberly and they're in Gooding this year. And, as far as Gooding goes, I mean, they're power. They're big. They just don't have the speed. And that's going to be the knock on Gooding is how well are they going to be able to handle speed? So they're going to have to just bully people around with their size, okay? Because, they've got a ton of returners, but are they fast enough to handle a team like Kimberly? That's going to be the challenge. But you know what? That game's the last game of the regular season, and there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be happening before everybody gets to that circled date on their calendar. But it's kind of thunder versus lightning, the speed of Kimberly versus the strength and size of Gooding.
Yeah, I know Kimberly on the track this past spring just had sprinters and athletes galore. Their basketball team was really good. Mm-hmm. It seems like there's 5 million Bears that are there. The last name Bear is very prominent in Kimberly. And so, I mean, when you look at these two teams, you mentioned the size versus speed. Which one do you lean more towards? When you look at these two teams side by side, who do you think is the better squad?
Oh man, I tell you, that's a tough one, because it's going to be a lot on Gooding to do something with that size to negate the speed. I mean, they're going to have to get pressure with 3-man fronts, 4-man fronts. They're going to have to be able to have some coverages in the secondary that's going to negate the speed, because Kimberly's going to be one of those teams that you can't go man-to-man coverage a lot of times with those guys, because they've got so much speed. They're just going to outrun you. So what is Gooding going to do scheme-wise that's going to try to negate that? Last year when they played, fun fact, I mean, Gooding huddled for the first time in about 9 years to try to slow the game down. That's how fast Kimberly is. And so you talk about these fast teams, you have no idea how fast Kimberly is. Blazing speed, and so when you look at them, I mean, they've got guys that you said are setting records in track. It's Widmeyer and Owens at quarterback, and then Gatlin Bear. I mean, who do you stop on Kimberly with the speed? We'll find out.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So in all your time in the Magic Valley, has there ever been a year like this where you've got these two titans that are not just going to go head to head in their conference, but really are going to be two of the more highly regarded teams in the entire state? I liken it back to maybe when, I hate to say this, but back when I was playing, just a couple years ago, it was Jerome and Buell of all teams, because we were in the same conference at that point, and both of us were loaded, and we would have these meetings against Buell, and both of us were just the top two in the state in A2 at the time. It was A2, and I remember coming down to the final game of the season, Jerome versus Buell, just like this matchup is, both teams undefeated, and the winner goes to state, and we ended up winning 28-0 and went on to win the state title. But when you've got two teams in the same conference that are so stacked, man, you don't see this very often. And so to answer your question, man, I'd have to go back a long time. Yeah.
A long time.
Well, you mentioned Buell. They are a program that has a storied past. It's been a tough couple of seasons, but they're kind of turning to an old familiar face here. Alan Reynolds, who was a part of the last state championship team at Buell, is there to take over the reins. I think that's really got the Buell fans excited.
Yeah, I mean, Alan Reynolds is pretty much come full circle now. I mean, he's a Buell grad going right back to his roots. And like you mentioned, he was part of the state titles in Buell back in the late 70s, 77, 78, 79. You know, and the thing about Buell is they kind of get lost in the shuffle when they're in the same conference as, you know, Kimberly and Gooding. You know, they went 1-7 last year, but, you know, 5 of those losses were to teams that made the postseason. And, you know, it's not like they have an empty cupboard, but, you know, what they do have is they've got an experienced coach coming in that knows how to win. You know, he's coached at, at Twin Falls for forever and, you know, and has done very well there. But he's just a guy that's got football in his blood, and now he's coming home to his alma mater. And there's something to be said about that. You know, when you get a hometown boy coming in that won when he was there as a player, can bring an attitude with him. And, you know, in Buell's, they're going to be okay. You know, and fun fact about Alan Reynolds is when I got into education back in a long time ago, I did my student teaching for Alan Reynolds, you know, when he was teaching health at Twin Falls High School. So Alan and I have been friends for years and years and years. And I've seen him retire twice. And funny, and I know he'll watch this and he'll get a kick out of it, is, you know, to kill time in retirement. You know, he kind of went to work doing some mowing for Nathan Bishop, you know, taking care of football fields and stuff like that. And Alan would come over and mow our football field. And so here's the, you know, ex-twin coach, retired, mowing our Jerome football field, and I'd go out there and boy, would I harass him. I'd dangle swag and all sorts of stuff, and boy, he wouldn't bite. And oh man, we had a lot of good banter. But you know, you just know the guy. You knew he wasn't going to stay retired. He's just a coach. That's who he is, and I'm really glad he's getting the opportunity in Buell, because when your career comes full circle, I mean, that's where he belongs. You know, I'm excited for him. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a real shot in the arm for the Buell players and fans there. And then Filer is the other team that's in the SCIC, and they've got a new coach as well, but it's the opposite end of the spectrum, Justin Brandsma, who's kind of just getting his career started. How young is he? Well, when I reached out to him, his email address was an isu.edu address. He still had his student email address from Idaho State University.
Yeah, you know, you got some young guys coming up through the ranks in a lot of different classifications. Brandsma's one of them, and you know, he's going to get a baptism by fire, you know, real quickly, because you know, Filer's had their struggles, you know, and they're going to try to get things back on track. But you know, he's still going to have to play Gooding and Kimberly and Buell, you know, and the pecking order of that conference is, you know, everybody thinks it's going to be Kimberly and then Filer, maybe the other way around, who knows, but then Buell and then Filer. But you look at the gap between second and third and fourth, I mean, it's huge in what people think is going to happen. Of course, injuries can derail all of that, and you never know, but Brandsman's going to have his work cut out for him, and I wish him the best to rebuild that program.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch the SCIC as the season unfolds. So that was kind of a straightforward prediction in terms of what the coaches thought, except at the top. Let's move to the Great Basin 7 conference at the 4A, which I got to be honest is like wide open. I feel like it's wide open this year.
Yeah, but I tell you what, the team that is loaded is Minico. Minico is stacked, and I think it's going to be theirs to lose, honestly. I mean, their junior class this year is absolutely legit. And one of the things that Minico is going to do is they're taking their quarterback, Brevin Trinkle, and they're moving him to running back. And I think that's a great move. I mean, Brevin's just a stud. He's a big kid. He's a strong kid. He's a tough kid. And he's going to be well served at running back and linebacker, because, you know, he's a kid that wants to move on to the next level, but it's going to be at the linebacker position. It's not going to be at the quarterback. And when they played him at quarterback over the last couple of years, that limited his time on the field, because you just can't have your quarterback on the field for every snap. It's a little different when he's in the running back position. Now they can utilize him more. And I think that's a very, very strong move. You know, Dylan McKenzie's going to be the quarterback this year, you know, and he's one of those guys that is just a game manager. He's a smart guy. He knows the offense. He's like having another coach on the field. And Minico's prowess has always been the run game, and it's not going to change. They're just going to be power football. They've got horses up front. They can move the line of scrimmage. Minico is going to be, back in the Perigo days where they just ran right down your throat. They maybe had 3 plays, stop them. That's how good this Minico team could be if they get it together. But one thing that Minico has not had in the past that they have this year is somebody that can stretch the field vertically from the wide receiver position, and that's going to be Quentin Poole. Quentin Poole is a junior, but he's also a tall wide receiver with speed. And so a lot of teams are, last year in particular, would just stack the box and just say, okay, fine, we know what you're going to do because you can't throw the ball. Well, this year might be a little different, and that's going to be a little wrinkle with Minico this year. You're going to have to respect that big play over the top, that they have. So it'll be interesting to see, but I do think it's Minico's conference right now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a nice 1-2 punch in the backfield with Brevin Tranquil and then Clayton Wilson, who was the main running back a year ago. That'll be a nice 1-2 punch. And Keelan McCaffrey, he's just a good coach. Ever since he took over that program 3-4 years ago, I mean, Minico has very consistently been in the playoffs and right in the thick of the conference race.
Yeah, they have. He's a Perigo descendant and played for Tim, and he knows the system, and they don't change it. A lot of times you get these young coaches that come in that are like, I'm going to put my stamp on everything and I'm going to change it all. And, McCaffrey hasn't done that in his 4th season now. It's just like, why fix something that ain't broken, and so they just keep doing what they do. And, kind of interesting that, Keelan McCaffrey, his little brother plays for Minico. So he's coaching his little brother this year. And I talked to him about that, and he's like, you know what? It's pretty cool, but I told all these, and this is Keelan talking, he said, I told all the assistant coaches, if we start fighting, it's okay, brothers fight. He goes, but if you see my little brother on top of me, pull him off.
Oh, that's funny. That's good. Yeah, especially when he's got pads on, it's a little easier for him to overpower a coach. Yeah. So the Keelan and Finn battles at practice might be fun to watch. Yeah. Well, the battles in the rest of the conference are going to be great as well. So yeah, you mentioned it. Minico is kind of the preseason favorite, and then depending on who you ask, Twin Falls or Jerome, probably second. Yeah,
and you talk about Jerome, the defending conference champions. They lost a ton to graduation, and a lot of those kids were, starters and never came off the field since their sophomore year. I mean, you're talking, J.W. James and Shaler Bingham, Jaden McIntyre, Kyle Craig, Joe Stevenson, Ryan Almanza. And then the big question for Jerome that still sort of remains is who's going to play quarterback. Dallin Thompson was the guy and, threw the ball like crazy. I mean, Jerome was pretty loaded last year, especially at skill position and linebacker. And now all of a sudden they are trying to get some young players to step up, but they're not, completely, without returners. I mean, they've got some guys coming back. I mean, Johnny Ramsey's in the backfield, Morgan Quam, Colton Elison, Logan Worthington, and then Gavin Capps at tight end, who had a big year for Jerome. He's back, and Nate McDonald is back. And so they've got some players. But I think anytime you lose a quarterback the caliber that Dallin was, that's going to be the tough one to replace because Jerome has, been notoriously known for that screen game, that Tony Franklin style offense, and you're going to need a good signal caller to pull that stuff off. And so, they're asking David Gill to step in and do that, and so we'll see what happens. And hopefully. Or Daniel Gill, beg your pardon. There's a couple of Gills. Daniel Gill is the guy that's going to be asked to do that. And so it'll be interesting to see because you look at Jerome's schedule, their first 2 games at Gooding, and then home against Kimberly.
We'll find out real quick, right?
Yes, they will, won't they?
Yeah, I agree. I think Jerome's going to be right there if some of those younger players that are getting their first varsity taste can step up. Twin Falls is another team that they lost a lot in the off season. I mean, Nick Swenson was a great quarterback. Their running back last year was a kid that came over from Washington. They weren't able to play in the fall because of COVID, and Luke Spitznagel, his family moved to Twin Falls, but he's gone now. There's a lot of question marks surrounding Twin Falls, but they are one of the highly regarded teams preseason.
Yeah, they are. And Twin Falls just has a pedigree. Even though they went 3-6 last year, they don't stay down very long. I mean, Twins, one of those teams that, they'll suffer a cycle of graduation just like a lot of other schools do. But the thing about Twin is they find a way back very quickly. Ben Coring's in his second year over at Twin, and he does have some returning players. I mean, Jace Malky, be a senior this year. I mean, he was first team all Great Basin last year. So, I mean, he's coming back as a team leader. Luke Moon, Tegan Severe, Isaac Lopez, Hickman, Carney. I mean, all these guys are coming back as a core. And, there's a couple of them that are on the offensive and defensive line, which is huge. But, it's going to be, again, the quarterback position. Nick Swenson, was kind of the leader. And, he not only on the football field, but he was for basketball too. And losing a kid like that has an impact in your school is going to be tough to replace. So, it'll be interesting to see what Twin does. I mean, they've got some good up-and-coming sophomores that are stepping in, whether it's Wyatt Salazabal and Grayson Keys or Grant Patterson. All these kids made names for themselves at the JV level. Now it's time to play under the big lights. So there's still some question marks there for Twin. But when you look at the pecking order of this conference and what everybody seems to think, like you said, I mean, Minico won, there's to lose. After that, Twin Jerome, what do you got? What's going to happen? And we'll see. And though Twin and Jerome will play midpoint of the season over in Jerome.
Yeah, that'll be a big one to circle on the schedule for sure. The team I think is going to be a real sleeper this year is Mountain Home. I think Mountain Home was set up for a nice season last year and had some just crushing injuries very early on in their season. They lost their starting quarterback very early on in the season. And we just got their preview back last night from head coach Jim Clark. It's up on our site now. And I think Mountain Home is going to be a team that could surprise. They've got, I think, one of the best offensive linemen, not in the conference, but in the entire state, Gunnar Clark. And talking with Coach Clark in his preseason assessment, he said they're totally retooling the offense. And I want to make sure I get the quote right here. He said, we are going to run a secret 8-wing concept that Idaho hasn't seen in a while. So this is like a new, I think it's like a 1920s or 30s offense but they're going old school. They're totally retooling, and they could be a tough out.
They could, and Mountain Home is one of those teams that is just always a question mark, and a lot of it is because of their locale. I mean, you're dealing with the Air Force Base and the military kids coming in. You don't know who's there one year to the next and whatever. But, they really kind of put themselves on the football map last year until they got injured. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, they're out of the equation. It's Jerome's conference now. But you're right. They've got some players you're going to have to contend with, and the Clark kid on the line. Anytime you got a kid like that, I mean, not to liken him to, professional, but whenever you have to deal, with an Aaron Donald on the Rams, I mean, that one guy just requires so much attention. And when you're having to put that kind of attention on somebody, that means you're not paying attention to somebody else. And that's what a kid like that can do, especially on the line. So it will be interesting to see what Mountain Home does this year. They could easily make a little bit of noise.
Yeah, I think a playoff spot is definitely within reach for them. And then, as we get towards the back half of the Great Basin 7, it's going to be teams that whoever can develop as the season progresses, I think, have a chance to finish higher. You've got Burley and Canyon Ridge and Wood River. Canyon Ridge, let's start with them. They've got a new head coach, James Poole. Bubba, he played at the University of Utah, was a great running back and wide receiver. And I got a chance to interact with him at the Idaho All-State games at Canyon Ridge High School earlier this summer, the All-Star games they do for 6th, 7th, 8th graders. And he was coaching one of the All-State teams. And I got to say, I like the way he handles himself, and I think he's going to be a great fit at Canyon Ridge.
No, I think so too. And I think what Canyon Ridge needed is a shot in the arm. They just needed something new, a breath of fresh air, just to reinvigorate a program that started to lose some numbers. Because I mean, here's Canyon Ridge, and they've got some work to do. Don't get me wrong. They're not going to turn around in a year, but Canyon Ridge is pushing 5A numbers, but can only field 2 football teams, and so what's going to happen there is going to have to be a culture change, and then kids are going to have to start coming out again, and they're going to have to rebuild that program. And so hopefully with some new blood, they can do that. And, and it's a big task taking over for Impo. Impo is a proven coach. He coached up at Bishop Kelly, but, now is AD, and that's just a lot on his plate. And so, it was time, and he made a great hire, and hopefully this change can kind of bring Canyon Ridge back into the discussion when it comes to the Great Basin. They just haven't been there for a while.
Yeah, I think they'll be fun to watch as the season goes along. Burley is a team that, has had flirts with success, and then they'll go from a good year to a down year. They seem to have these swings where they're always going back and forth between, pretty solid to really struggling. Yeah,
and they're kind of in the same boat as Canyon Ridge as far as like a football culture goes. They're on the lower end though, the 4A numbers, and so if something, classifications would ever change, Burley would be in the discussion about moving down a classification. But, I will say they've got the nicest field in the conference. The stadium is immaculate. But, they've got some work to do there too. They've had some revolving doors of the head coach position as well. And so they've got to get some consistency going there to reinvigorate that program, because they're in the same boat as Canyon Ridge, 2 teams. If you want to be successful at the 4A level, you've got to be able to get the numbers, and that's where it starts. And so until that happens, those schools are going to have a little bit of work to do, and of course they're going to have a great class that comes in and kind of lights a fire, but can they keep that fire going? And so hopefully down the road, we get a lot of these teams that have been sort of at the bottom of the conference relevant again.
Yeah, and the final school we want to touch on is Wood River, and I think they've been picked 7th, not because of they don't think there's talent, but there's a lot of unknowns. Wood River only got to play 2 games last year, and then they had a quasi exhibition game with Cary where they played 11 man on offense and 8 man on defense. And they just their entire season was taken away from them because of COVID-19 and very strict restrictions by the school board in their districts. And I know late in the season there was a petition to bring athletics back, but by then it was too late for Wood River. I like their coach. Shane Carden is a good, young, bright mind. He was a quarterback at East Carolina University not too long ago. But I think you have to develop that consistency, and it's hard to do that when you only got to play 2 games.
Yeah, it is. And Wood River is just a different animal to begin with. Being up there in the Haley area, Sun Valley area, it's just a different mindset. It's a different socioeconomic everything about it is different. Okay, so we'll start there. But I think the big thing is that we may see the effects of that COVID season, because they're the one school that really shut it all down. And they were the ones that canceled seasons, and what that does to a team or a program or a school that really is kind of different anyway, and is maybe hanging on to these programs barely, it almost decimates them. And now it's a rebuild, and you talk about football, look at all those kids that came out last year, never got a season. And all of a sudden they're going to come out again, or they lost to graduation, and the ones that are coming back, or how many have experience, and so you are rebuilding in a way. And Wood River was never, a football powerhouse to begin with. There was a year that, Kevin Stilling had them and did an amazing job with them several years ago, but lately they haven't been. And now you're asking them to rebuild a football program. It's going to be tough for them. And I hope they get it done. And I hope their community rallies, because I know they're still in some controversy up there, about how they want to start their school year, what restrictions, if any, do they want to have, because they, like I said, it's a different mindset up there. It's a different animal. And so they have their own little internal battles that are playing into this, but they are ones that are really going to feel the effects of that COVID year.
Yeah, and it goes hand in hand with, it affects Wood River, but it also affects Cary, which is a team that is on the opposite end. They're a dominant football program, and they're expecting to be in the mix again this year. So the dichotomy there is also very interesting. But I think
it truly is. Yeah, it truly is. And when you talk about Blaine County, I mean, you've got two of the most opposite schools philosophically, in a way, in that same district. I mean, and they kind of fight each other a little bit. I mean, not, one's 4A, one's, 1A, but their beliefs and the way that they kind of want to do things, but they all fall under the same umbrella because they're in the same school district. So from the outside looking in, that was and is an interesting dichotomy that they've got going on up there. And like you said, Cary is a perennial favorite every year, and to have them shut down, oh man, to climb to the top of the mountain, just to have everything shut down on them is detrimental to any program. And Cary is fighting like crazy not to let that happen.
I really hope that we are able to play a season as normally as we can. I think it's been proven that it can be done at the college level, at the high school level, at the youth level. It's been proven that if there are safeguards in place, you should be able to continue as normally and regularly as you can. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think everybody is about ready to get back to normal, and not to turn this into any type of political thing, because that's not what we're doing here. But, you have to have some sort of common sense to get back to normal, and let these kids live, because we went through all the safety protocols that we were asked to do last year, and we did them. And then when we lifted restrictions towards, the end of, a lot of it was towards the end of the winter seasons, and then we had spring seasons outside that were normal, for the most part. We didn't see the uptake in cases and whatnot. And a lot of schools abandoned the masks at spring break and didn't see the rise in cases, and everybody's talking about new strands and everything else. But at the same time, these kids have got to have some normalcy, because the detriment that they went through and the effects that are going to be felt with this, they're going to last a while, and so we've got to get them back.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself, Scott. That was a good starting point here for what's going to be a week or two of previews, because next week we'll start to actually have some soccer matches, a football game or two. I know Minico is going to host Century, and which should be a pretty interesting matchup. So yeah, we'll talk some more teams and players to keep an eye on next week. For now, though, I think this was a good starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to get it going. There's a lot of storylines developing down here. And we're excited to kind of dig in and find those and bring them to you every week.
Yep. It's all right here on the Magic Valley Prepcast, your top stop for all of your District 4 coverage each and every week here on IdahoSports.com. Couple of ways to get it. You can get the audio at our website, IdahoSports.com, as well as wherever you download your podcasts. You can also watch the video if you want to see what Scott's office looks like. He's got a lot of cool stuff on the walls. You can check out the video on our YouTube channel as well as our Facebook page. So until next time, for Scott Burton, I'm Brandon Bainey on the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. Thanks for listening.